And hello everyone, welcome to the Forrest and Company webinar, Continuous Improvement, Using Your Head to Stay Ahead. My name is Michael Clark, Director of Business Development here at Forrest and Company, and I will be your moderator today. With me is Julian Chapman, my president, the president of Forrest and Company. Hello, Julian.
Good afternoon, Michael, and good morning to those in the West.
Firstly, for everyone, here's some housekeeping. This webinar will be 45 minutes long, including a few minutes for Q&A at the end. I have muted everyone's mic so that we're not talking over top of each other. Do send me your questions via the question box in the GoToWebinar interface. The lovely and talented Laura Phillips is here. She's going to be monitoring them and passing them on to me at the end of toward the end of the show. Finally, to all registered attendees, I will forward to you a copy of Julian's deck, as well as a link to the recording of this webinar, and finally, a resource to help your thinking about continuous improvement that Julian will unpack for us a little later in the show. So, without much more ado, Julian, I'm going to pass this on to you and ask you, really, what is continuous improvement really?
Well, it's continuous improvement is used by a lot of different organizations these days, and there doesn't seem to be any real clarity on what they mean. I mean, one definition is any improvement in a policy, a plan, process, product, or procedure. It's got a lot of P's in it, but what I like to think of continuous improvement as is really just a mindset. It is a mindset of constant improvement. How can I make things better? And in that mindset, what we're doing is we're focusing our energy not on judgment and not on acceptance of the status quo, but on how can we make things better and finding another way to do things. And it is about adapting our current reality to a more desirable future state, somehow making things better. And ultimately, continuous improvement leads us into new things and new products and new processes, new policies, procedures, all of those P's.
All those P's in there. So that's interesting. I just wanted to backtrack on that. So what we're talking about here is an attitude on top of the mechanics of continuous improvement.
Absolutely. We'll get into the mechanics of it, but it is that attitude that I'm going to look at things from the standpoint of improving them, making them faster, better, the likes that actually drive an organization forward. So continuous improvement can be used at home, it can be used at work, it can be used in any number of different ways and means. It isn't based on some secret decoder ring where one has to have a specialty in continuous improvement.
Okay.
It's the field of everyone in every day in every way.
Okay, so let's get some of the little things out of the way right away. Incremental improvements or breakthrough improvements? Where's continuous improvement on those two?
Well, I go back to the idea of the mindset. I think that it's both incremental improvements and breakthrough improvements. And the more breakthrough it is, the more it may lead us into innovation.
Okay.
But the more incremental is how can I every day make something better? How can I cut down my cycle time? And of course, continuous improvement takes its roots in theory out of manufacturing. But in reality, it is about a mindset of how do I make things better every day.
Okay. So you mentioned innovation. Again, just to be clear here, what's the relationship between continuous improvement and innovation?
Well, the idea of continuous improvement and this mindset of continuous improvement is the root of innovation. Now, it is the root of creating the new thing, and that's the innovation part. Now, like continuous improvement, people use the word innovation and it means different things to different people. When I talk about innovation, I'm talking about how do you get a new thing accepted? And so that can be a new process. So how do I get my boss to buy into the new process? That could be a new product, how to get my boss to buy the new product.
Okay.
Or it could be a whole new strategy for an organization.
So there seems to be an angle more of innovation is at least from your perspective, innovation means the adaptation or the selling or convincing people to proceed with the new.
And continuous improvement, I'm looking for the opportunities. I have this mindset to focus on it. In innovation, I am taking something that is fundamentally unfamiliar to everybody else because it's new, and I'm trying to make it acceptable and get it out there. That could be taking a new product and putting it into the marketplace, or that can be just trying to get a new system implemented.
But it's safe to say at this point then that continuous improvement is basically the foundation of innovation.
It's the mindset for
right.
Innovation.
Okay, got
it's
it.
the mindset that launches innovation, that launches that creativity to come up with something new, something different. Now, we may have done it in the past. Continuous improvement can recycle back, but it's new from where we are right now.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the new, and that's inevitable that we'll wind up talking about change. So where does continuous improvement fit within the overall idea of change management, change processes, or for that matter, resistance to change?
Well, it is an integral part of change. And all things need to change. Otherwise, if they stay in stasis, they will eventually decrease, die, whatever the case may be. So continuous improvement is about bringing change into an organization. It does bring change. It launches change. And that change management piece is all about, how do I innovate? How do I get that new thing in?
Okay.
And get that change brought about? Now, resistance to change is a very human reaction. We refer to this as anaclesis. And I think actually you've done webinars on anaclesis.
We have before. Indeed.
Yeah. Anaclesis is our need to lean on things. We lean on our old beliefs, our ideas, our old constructs. Many years ago, everybody believed the world was flat. We leaned on that as human beings, that the world was flat. Along comes a number of different people saying, no, the world is in fact round or spherical. That was an anaclitic moment. So change shakes us from the things that we lean on, our old way of doing things. With a mindset of continuous improvement, what you're doing is you're identifying the opportunities for change, and you're changing how people look at their day-to-day work.
Despite this anaclesis, despite
the
resistance.
So you have to overcome it.
Okay.
You have to overcome that resistance.
Now, I know that some of our listeners out there are practicing CI right now, or they have CI processes. And not to put a pun on this, but let's talk about lean, for example. What's the perspective for people out there in the audience right now that are continuous improving using lean, let's say? What perspective are you bringing that they don't already know?
Well, lean is process. Lean is a mechanical process to work through. And in our clients that have implemented lean, and they're very different from where lean originally came from. In other words, manufacturing of automobiles through Toyota and through the Toyota way. But many organizations have taken lean constructs as a way to get to that continuous improvement. But it's just a process. What we're talking about in continuous improvement is the mindset that I am looking for those opportunities to be faster, better, smarter than I would normally be. And so all the lean in the world can't get you there unless you're using the proper thinking.
Okay.
Because I will still have a natural resistance. Many of the lean initiatives actually fall upon the rocks or run aground on the rocks because of this anaclesis. So you have to have that mindset that we are continuously improving. We're not finding flaws, we're finding opportunity. We're finding opportunity.
That's interesting. That's a nice distinction.
And the mindset is about how can I make things better? Because we can always make things better.
Okay. All right. So now let's go on to the why above it. So really, why do people continuously improve? What's the benefit?
Well, I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but if we really look at it, it's about being faster. It's about being smarter. It's about being better. It is in fact around efficiency. And what we find with many of our clients is they are driving to efficiency. I've run into a number of CEOs that we've worked with over the years who talk about the fact that they're not getting to where they need to go. They're not getting that change in their organization. They're not getting to that goal. And I posit that it's because of a lack of mindset around continuous improvement. So continuous improvement is that opportunity to go somewhere, to make my business better. And if we stay in stasis, if we stay in our old way of doing things, we're not going to get there.
Okay, all right. Now, is there something particular about continuous improvement at this point in time?
Well, we live in what's known as a VUCA world. So it's about the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, VUCA I was introduced to in my days in the Canadian Forces. The American military identified this. The Marines wrote on this extensively because we live in a world that is volatile. The changes and the news that you see, the newsreels every day talk about the volatility in the markets. I haven't seen the markets so far today, but if I've been watching in the last few weeks, that's volatility defined. The uncertainty, we're in an economy right now where it's very uncertain. Where's the dollar going to go next? Where's the price of oil going to go next? There's total uncertainty. We don't know the implications of Middle East foreign policy. There's no certainty out there whatsoever.
Okay.
And then the complexity of it, all of these things are interrelated. All of the things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are interrelated. And so we have to recognize that we live in a very complex world now. And then ultimately, we have to get comfortable with ambiguity and recognize that there is ambiguity in everything. There is no certainty, except for, I guess, that old adage of death and taxes.
Right, okay.
But we live in a world that is very ambiguous, and we're not sure where things are going. So staying in the status quo is unacceptable. Staying in stasis is unacceptable. We have to find ways to be faster, smarter, better, more efficient, and ultimately to create trust.
And this mindset of continuous improvement, tie the bow for me here. How is that connected to overcoming VUCA?
Well, it's about how I have to think differently about the world. So the mindset is about my thinking. Now, thinking drives everything. And I should clarify that when we're talking about thinking, we're not just talking about the cognitive realm of thinking, but the affective realm as well. How do I engage my whole self in doing something? So this mindset is about how do I think differently about the things that I see on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, interesting. All right, now we're moving to who and when. So, Julian, who is accountable for continuous improvement? And my question is fits within a bigger picture about organizations. Is it managerial leadership? Is it an executive mandate? What about those organizations that have R&D departments? The line, where is the accountability for CI?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that about the R&D departments and various things. Various organizations put in place different processes to get this continuous improvement without driving the mindset. So it's the role of everyone to practice continuous improvement, but ultimately who is accountable is the manager. Because natural tendency is for us to stay in stasis. So I need some other form to move me forward. Now, what happens in some organizations when they focus on continuous improvement is they mistrust their management. So they don't leave it to management. They leave it to the suggestion box, the anonymous suggestion box. Now, what we found in our experience and in our understanding of engagement is when you leave the anonymous suggestion box, you leave anonymity into it, I have no one to engage with. My suggestion goes into the box.
Okay.
I don't know necessarily what happens to it. Some organizations that are very good at this will arrange for some way for somehow that individual to be acknowledged for the suggestion that they gave. But if it's anonymous, well, I'm not necessarily. So it doesn't necessarily work from that standpoint. We say that it is a manager's accountability to make things better for their employees every day in every way. A manager needs to exercise continuous improvement in how that manager deals with their direct reports on a daily basis. And it's the realm of both looking at it from the standpoint that as a manager, I have to practice continuous improvement to get things better, faster, more efficient, smarter, whatever. But it's also my job to overcome people's natural anaclesis to change.
It's interesting. Just unpack for me a second. I just had a thought. Where's leadership relative to this? Is when you, if you make a distinction between leadership and management, is leadership about change as versus management?
Oh, they're both about change. They're both about change. Leadership is I'm going to get you to do something that you wouldn't necessarily do on your own.
Okay.
And management is about me carefully designing the work and making things happen. So in continuous improvement, it is both a management function and it's a leadership function. The element of helping someone to overcome their anaclesis is the leadership side of it. Practicing continuous improvement, making things more efficient, better, smarter, faster, is the management function.
Okay. All right. Well, now you may have implicitly answered this already, but I really want to throw it out there. When should an organization and when should an individual continuously improve, if you'll use the expression?
Well, if we stay in the same way, that old Einstein quote, if you use the same thinking that got you where you are now, then you're not going to be able to get anywhere different in the future. And I've horribly butchered them and paraphrased that, but you get the point.
Right.
We have to always be looking at opportunities for continuous improvement. Now, there's an interesting facet here of what happens when we practice wanton continuous improvement. And this is why the manager has to be involved in this, because we can create too much change in an organization. There can be too much change as a result of this. So a manager has to make the decision as to what's going to actually happen. They get input from their direct reports, one-on-one. They ask for input. This is actually how you get engagement, is actually by asking for input on opportunities where they can be better, where things can be better, where the work can be better, where it can be more comfortable, where it can be easier, all of those sort of things. And that's rooted in the engagement.
So that, I love the expression wanton continuous improvement. I take it, well, unpack that for me. That's a manager directing somebody?
It's a manager identifying where the opportunities are and giving the thumbs up to go and change that.
Okay.
Right? So you don't necessarily, I used to work in manufacturing of aircraft. You don't want people changing the designs of the aircraft because they see an opportunity for continuous improvement.
Okay, I see.
Planes tend to fall out of the sky if they haven't been engineered properly. No offense to the manufacturers of aircraft, but it's a reality. So the manager has to engage in that and have a discussion around it.
Okay, so if I was to come to you and say, Forrest and Company, it's a great idea for us to go into parking lots.
That's right. Well, it needs to be related to your work.
Right. Okay.
Now, of course, as the director of sales and marketing, of course, you see an opportunity.
That's right. So
but it isn't necessarily tied to the strategy of the organization.
Okay. All right.
That isn't necessarily where we're going. Now, that raises a whole other, and that'll be the next, I guess your next webinar will be about strategy. What is strategy?
Okay.
And strategy is an end state, deciding what do we want to be when we grow up. And we need to be following.
And then continuous improvement, sort of chugging along in a direction. Like, sure, the new, let's try, let's test, let's see what's better out there, but nonetheless within parameters.
Yes, and managers can actually give tasks that are about continuous improvement.
Okay.
Find me an opportunity to do this better, which is different from a stretch goal.
Okay, unpack that.
So the point about a stretch goal is I'm going to push you to your limits, and I'm going to give you a task, and I'm going to give you a goal that we know you're not going to get. We all agree that you're not going to get, but we're going to nod our heads and say, yes, we're agreeing, knowing full well you're never going to get there.
Okay.
So the point of a stretch goal is to try and push things a bit. But in the mindset of continuous improvement, you're actually doing that on a day-to-day basis. You're seeing the opportunity, and you're having a conversation saying, there's an opportunity here.
Okay, interesting. All right. Next in our list of questions here is the how, in the big picture how. So how does a person or an organization, let's say, approach continuous improvement?
Well, we're back to this mindset piece. And it's about changing our mindset. There are specific thinking styles. And in the work that Jerry Rhodes and Phillips initiated with Jerry Rhodes around thinking, which we've talked about in some of our webinars in the past, there are 3 driving forces in thinking. Continuous improvement is driven by one of those. But it has to be about letting go of the other 2.
Okay.
So the best analogy that I draw to this is it's kind of an analogy of front of mind and back of mind. So we have certain thinking that is at the forefront of our mind, that is there on a day-to-day basis. But what happens in a lot of organizations is that the continuous improvement thinking is actually at back of mind. So we need to bring it from the back of mind to the front of mind, and that which is in the front of mind
needs to go
back of mind. It needs to go to the back of the bus, so to speak. So continuous improvement, the first stage of this is about realizing what are the possibilities that are out there. It's about looking and seeing something and realizing that there's a possibility. It's not about judging, which is part of that anaclesis piece. Right?
Okay.
I put up a wall and I say, this is not good. And it's not about the status quo or just simply fact gathering. It's about how can I realize new possibilities? And that's the source of all change. And what we're realizing is ideas and potential possibilities that are often divergent, lateral, and often surprising to other people. The more surprising they are, the more difficult it is for other people to necessarily recognize.
I want to backtrack here just for a second, if you don't mind. So we're talking about 3 different types of thinking. You mentioned the judging, passing judgment, and then we talked about information gathering, and then the third one is the thinking that supports continuous improvement.
Which is all about realizing, which is different from describing the truth or judging what is right. Realizing what is new launches us into a particular direction.
So for those of us who use the judgment and information gathering at front of mind, there is the implication that the thinking about realizing the new is in your mind. It's just being shuttled into the back.
That's right. And that what we've found is that people can go there. What we've also found statistically is only 20% of managers in Canada have a preference for this type of thinking.
Okay.
And so it isn't necessarily natural. Now, there are some managers, for example, who are very good at it and who have that preference in mind. That's actually where you can get too much change.
Okay.
Because they're always in that realm. So it's about what's the right thinking for the right time. And when we talk about continuous improvement in the mindset, that's when you have to bring realizing those possibilities forward.
So one of the things that's getting in the way, not even just anaclesis or whatever the resistance to change, is the fact that statistically speaking, people are not inclined to think this way, to think about the new, the continuous improvement.
Exactly. And the only way to bring those things to the front of your mind is to ask a question. When you ask someone a question, you force them into thinking. They must think. So questions drive us into these different mindsets. And so having the right question at the right time will help you to shift into the mindset. So the question for realizing something new is, what new thing can I bring to my mind? What new thing can I come up with here? What is the new opportunity here? What would be more effective here? And what different perspective can I get?
Okay. So actually this is an interesting segue then from the how, big picture how, to the actual how to. How does an individual organization practice continuous improvement? We're talking about driving into the front of your brain the types of thinking that are needed for continuous improvement. But I mean, right off the bat, my question to you is, what do you mean what do you mean thinking? Thinking to me is completely abstract. So let's put some edges on it.
Well, as I said, thinking is about how do I mobilize my entire self. So it's both my mind and my body in order to do something. In the workplace, all thinking is in order to do something. And so thinking is my ability to answer the questions that are out there. It's my ability to work through those questions that I talked about earlier and come up with an answer.
Okay, so you mentioned also Jerry Rhodes and Phillips, the work that was done, if I recall correctly, late 70s, early 80s. And I wondered, can you unpack that for me? What was the work there?
Well, so the intent behind the work was to identify ways that individuals could think more effectively. A continuous improvement exercise in and of itself. So how can we reduce the number of resources that we're using? How can we be more effective, more efficient, faster, cheaper? How can we create trust in our thinking? So they did a research in how people think in the workplace. And they identified using interviews and listening to the questions that people asked, they identified different types of thinking. And they identified 25 different thinking styles that people tend to use. Now, 25 is hard to use, but as they were added into process, they could provide a robust framework for that.
And you've talked about this, the overarching thinking style for continuous improvement is the idea of realize, of discovering the new, of basically what brilliant idea can I come up with. So taking it down from that overarching thought, let's actually talk about the if I can say this, can I say this, the mechanical steps involved in thinking?
Well, in continuous improvement requires 4 of these 25 thinking operations. 25 thinking styles, realize being one of them, the overarching one. But these 4 that are on the screen right now, challenge, redescribe, escape, and pursue, are the 4 tools that someone can use in order to continuously improve. And so when we talk about challenge, for example, it's about questioning normal. It's about questioning the way things are right now. It's questioning what other people believe to be the truth. And it's questioning common sense. So the question that is attached to that, literally the question that's attached to that, are we sure we can't do this thing? Are we sure we can do this thing? And I'll give you a case in point from one of our clients. A number of years ago, the retail community in Canada was very nervous about the approach of Walmart coming into Canada. In fact, we had Target as well, was another one, but in the early days, there was the issue of, here comes this behemoth into Canada, how are we all going to survive? And many people turned and said, the Canadian retail landscape is not going to survive. Well, one of our clients, Canadian Tire, chose to use challenge and broke with the normal and said, no, this isn't going to be an issue. And so they were asking the question, are we sure we can't do this?
Right, okay.
And their answer was, we are absolutely certain we can overcome this. And that's exactly what they've done.
So they challenged...
They challenged the common thinking, the status quo. They challenged what was in that space. And they found new opportunities. And through continuous improvement, which then later became innovation, which then led them into different realms, they have done quite well.
Yeah, exactly. They've survived both the appearance of Walmart and the, however brief, appearance of Target.
So challenge is the initiator, because it's what gets you over the hump of the current status quo. It's questioning the sacred cows. It's pushing over the sacred cows. We've always done it this way. Well, in continuous improvement, you have to find a new way to do it in order to reduce cycle time. Because what I'm hearing from everybody is the old line, you have to do more with less. Well, we've got to figure out a way of doing it more efficiently, faster, cheaper, better. And so that's what continuous improvement does. So challenge initiates that. Challenging ourselves and really asking ourselves, how can I do this differently? And so that's the starting point.
I'm sort of sensing that this is mindful, directed, conscious thinking. Does that sound about right?
That's probably the best way to describe it. And so what we're doing with challenge and with these thinking styles is we're driving ourselves into a particular direction. We're throwing the challenge to the forefront of our mind, and we're pushing back those other thinking styles that are about gathering information, doing things the same way, all of those sort of things. And it's about being positive and optimistic. And so you have to look at what are the constraints that we may be under right now and challenging them. And really questioning the old way of doing things. And sometimes, so as in the case of Canadian Tire, they asked the question, what predictions of the future have I accepted as fact or have I not accepted as fact?
Okay,
so
I see.
They broke out using that. So that's how you use challenge to really open it up and really begin to identify that there is another way to do this. Now, the next one that I was going to talk about, which is on our screen, is redescribe. So as we describe something that is in existence. In redescribe, we turn it around and look at it very differently. We look at it from a completely different angle. So it's creating an unusual variation of what's already there. So I'm going to look at this differently. Part of that is tied to challenge. I'm going to challenge what my accepted beliefs are, but I'm going to look at it differently. I'm going to look at myself through a different lens. So I reconsider the old things that are there in order to reach something new. And there's lots of energy in this redescribe. So I can see things. I can walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Now, I'm going to use another one of our clients who did this quite well. The Loyalty One, the Air Miles people, have had a tremendous success through the Air Miles program. But in identifying that can only go so far. So they have identified that they have a set of expertise. So now they have a very big consulting arm that provides excellent advice based on their experience to clientele. Now that's taking them out of their current realm. That's redescribing their world as it was now and changing it ever so slightly, but to great success. And so when we use redescribe, we're asking the question, how could we perceive this thing differently? How could we perceive our business differently? In what other ways could we view our business? What else could we do? Now, at the lowest level in the organization, how can I perceive our process for doing things as being inefficient? Is a redescribe. And so that launches me into trying to find a way to make it better and make it more efficient. So what if we switch the focus between the extremes? What if it was bigger or smaller, faster or slower, taller or shorter, upside down? It's about looking at it from a completely different angle. And what if we thought about it from different perspectives of space, time, direction, intention, force, all of these sort of things?
So it could be literal. If you're talking about improvement on a product, you could quite literally look at it from another angle. But conceptually, you're looking at it just conceptually from another angle. That's, like I said, challenge the assumptions, and then let's try, well, what if this was used for making telephone poles? Just sort of playing with that idea until an insight appears.
Well, and the analogy that people use is, making a better mousetrap. Well, in order to make a better mousetrap, you have to think like a mouse.
There you go. Okay.
So you need to change your perspective.
All right. What about escape?
So escape. Now, escape's a very interesting one because escape is all about out-of-the-box thinking. And it's coming to a new and interesting variation on what already exists by changing the focus or angle of perception and twisting and creating different permutations. It's about using paradox. And quite often, humor is a very powerful tool in this. The analogy that I use for this is it's a story, and you'll have to bear with me because I think it may be a bit of an urban myth, but I'll use it anyway.
Right.
The story of how BC Hydro dealt with ice on the lines. And so they brought together a tiger team. So now what we're talking about is we're talking about continuous improvement, what a specific group brought together for it. And the decision was, okay, so how are we going to get the ice off the lines? So a bright light using escape said, we put honeypots at the top of the pylons, and the bears in the winter will climb up to get the honey at the top of the pylon. Now, there was a bit of fun in that.
Right.
It's a quirk, right? It's an unusual way to look at it. First of all, because bears hibernate in the winter.
True.
So, of course, that can have been the end of it all. But someone else heard that. And from the standpoint of continuously improving on that idea, that individual said, well, it's about creating a shake in the lines. So what if we took helicopters and flew them over the lines? The wash from the rotors would then shake the wires and the ice would fall. Now, whether it's true or not, it's a great analogy for escape, because it's about using that out of the box. Why on earth would we be talking about bears when we're talking about hydroelectricity? But it was enough to find a new way to look at it.
It's interesting because it also shows to me that this is a multi-step process. You might not find the answer in these specific thinking styles, but it might lead you to something that will lead you to something that will be the answer that you're looking for.
Exactly.
Okay, what about pursue?
So pursue is continuous improvement in a box. It's about exploring with curiosity to be faster and faster and farther and farther. It pursues more and more better options that are out there. It's about movement forward, about creating change. And it's about being curious and hopeful. And it's linked directly to challenge. It's linked directly to redescribe. It's linked directly to escape. But it's rooted in the notion of continuous improvement. This is where the mindset comes from. It's about how can I do this differently? And the analogy that I use, or the example that I'll use of one of our clients is the Northwest Company out of Winnipeg.
Right.
A very successful Canadian retailer. And they've been the retailer in the Arctic for over 20 years now, and have then gone on to then buy up the Alaska Commercial Company to open Giant Tiger in Western Canada. So what they're doing is they're finding opportunities to go farther and farther. And ultimately, most recently with the acquisition of Costulas, that now has them as retailers in Guam in the South Pacific and in other places in the Caribbean. So the point here is there's an organization that is driven by pursue and the pursuit of continuous improvement to go faster and farther. So, and they do question, how can this be done? And they've been exceedingly successful because of putting that at the forefront of their mind. And that's their mindset.
It's interesting with pursue, though, I could see it being one of these classic management problems where you've got somebody who's just on a tear, right? They're just, your direct report is just going and going and going and won't actually stop and do something. The role of the manager there?
Well, the role of the manager is to ensure that we are staying within the guidelines, and staying within the parameters. But it is the role of the manager to identify the opportunities with the input of the direct report. We call this best advice. So my direct report gives me best advice on where they see opportunities for continuous improvement. Best advice is not my best bitch, if you'll pardon the term.
Right.
It's my best advice on what would make things better here. And so in best advice, you are ultimately getting engagement. Because it's no longer time for me to sit on my hands and see opportunities go by the wayside. My manager holds me accountable to give them their best advice. So in other words, I can't choose. My job is to look for opportunities to make things better. And then I bring them to my manager.
And the manager sets the loose parameters for that, or in context or in dialogue, I suppose you're actually getting the parameters for that. So I'm not going to come to you with a suggestion about parking lots.
Well, but it may be quite valid for a question of parking lots if the question of parking lots is related directly to your work.
Got it. Okay.
Right. And so this is invaluable to get best advice flowing in the organization to find opportunities for continuous improvement.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to let everybody know out there, for everybody who has registered, I'll be sending you this resource, Thinking Styles and Prompting Questions. It's a much expanded version of what you saw on the previous slide, and I send it to you in best wishes and hopefully for great continuous improvement. Just the last question, Julian, before we go to Q&A. This is a really big one. How do you embrace continuous improvement? What does that look like? You've mentioned this in bits and pieces, but organizationally, what is involved?
Well, in order to create change in an organization, you have to have accountability.
Okay.
Where a manager holds a direct report accountable to do something, to change direction. Remember the anaclesis, I'm not necessarily going to change unless there's an initiation there. At the same time, we can't just rely on heavy-handed management. I have to have that sense of responsibility and that mindset to be thinking about opportunities for continuous improvement.
Okay.
Because if we rely solely on accountability, it comes from top down. And open and honest dialogue is the key to that. The notion of best advice.
Best advice. Okay. Well, that's a fascinating dynamic between a manager and a direct report. I would assume that would be from the top to the bottom. It's like
absolutely. But let's not just wait. Let's think in terms of how can I make things better, faster, smarter, and at the same time create trust while I'm doing that.
Yeah, fascinating. Great. Okay. And just going to actually pass it off now to some Q&A. I've got a great question here. I'm interpreting this here. I'm sitting at my desk. We've got somebody here. I'm sitting at my desk waiting. I've been told to continuous improve. What do I do?
Well, first thing is it's the mindset. I have to be looking at the things that I do, and are there opportunities? I practice continuous improvement when I'm driving all the time, because I'm always looking for a way to get there faster, to reduce the resources, in other words, cut down on the amount of gas. So when I'm driving, I'm always thinking in terms, how's a better way to do that? I also practice continuous improvement when I pack for the weekend. I carefully pack the back of the car so that everything fits, and so that I don't have to go back and repack it. I think about it ahead of time. How can I be more efficient, more effective in how I do that? So practicing it day to day will build those muscles, build those thinking styles, so that when you have to do it for work, it's so much easier. And you're able to take those things that are at the back of mind and bring them to the front of mind, and vice versa.
Okay, all right. We've got one question, and here another one. Can I use the thinking questions in the context of my organization's current initiatives? Kaizen, lean, for example.
Great question. Because these are the root of Kaizen and lean. These same questions, because there are these 25 thinking operations. We have yet to find the 26th. So these 25 thinking operations are at the root, and they are rooted in the notions of Kaizen and lean, because it's the same type of thinking. So you can absolutely use the questions. And the questions, we found that in a number of our clients where they have lean initiatives underway, they actually use the effective intelligence questions to enhance people's understanding and to be able to steer people's thinking. Rather than giving them a process, you give them a way to think about it. And by doing that, you will get better results. So it's a continuous improvement exercise in and of itself.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you very much, Julian. And thank you, everybody, for attending. You've been listening to Julian Chapman in conversation to talk to us today about continuous improvement, using your head to stay ahead. This has been a Forrest & Company webinar, part of our growing list of resources available through our Forest Fire link on our webpage. To sign up, please just visit our Forest Fire page on the website and click on the Communications Group button. Registration is free, and you can unsubscribe at any time, of course, but it's my job to make sure that you don't want to. With that, thank you very much, Julian. Thank you very much, Laura. And everybody, I wish you a good afternoon.
Thank you, Michael.